When the Turner family moves into a secluded mansion, hoping for a fresh start, they unknowingly step into a nightmare. As tensions rise and strange occurrences escalate, they uncover the tragic history of a wronged caretaker whose vengeful spirit haunts the house. Can they confront the dark past, unlock its secrets, and put an end to the terror? Or will they become the latest victims of the curse that binds the old estate? Henry, the father, drove the rusting car up the winding driveway, its tires crunching on the overgrown gravel. The mansion loomed ahead like a forgotten relic of a darker time, its windows clouded and its shingles warped by decades of neglect. Margaret sat stiffly in the passenger seat, clutching her handbag with nervous fingers. In the back seat, Arthur stared out the window with a book balanced on his lap, while Clara pressed her face to the glass, her curiosity piqued by the ominous building. "This is our fresh start," Henry announced, though his tone betrayed his doubt. The family was escaping their old life. The stares, the whispers, the fallout from Henry's violent outburst that had cost him his job and their reputation. The mansion, offered at an impossibly low price, was their chance to rebuild. But from the moment they crossed the threshold, the house seemed alive. The air was heavy, the silence oppressive, and the scent of mildew clung to the walls. The family dismissed the initial unease as exhaustion from the move. They couldn't afford to turn back now. Henry spent most of his days sulking in the cavernous living room, his frustration simmering beneath the surface. Margaret busied herself with cleaning and organizing, trying to make the house feel like a home. Arthur retreated to the dusty library, his escape into books becoming more literal as he discovered ancient tomes left behind by the previous occupants. Clara, the youngest, roamed the house with wide-eyed wonder, her fearless curiosity leading her into shadowy corners and locked rooms. The family's fragile unity began to fray almost immediately. Henry snapped at Margaret for trivial reasons, while Arthur and Clara bickered over imagined slights. The mansion seemed to amplify their tensions, feeding off their discord. The first sign of the haunting was subtle. Henry's cigarettes disappeared from his pocket, only to reappear in the freezer. Margaret found an old mirror in the attic, its surface tarnished and cloudy. But every time she walked past it, she felt as though someone was watching her. Clara heard footsteps in the hallway outside her room at night, though no one was there when she opened the door. For Arthur, the signs were more personal. While reading in the library late one night, he heard faint sobbing. At first, he thought it was his sister playing a prank, but the sound grew louder, more anguished, and seemed to come from inside the walls. When he mentioned it to Henry, his father dismissed it with a curt, "It's just an old house settling." The ghost's presence grew more malevolent as the days passed. Margaret found a family photograph in the dining room. Their faces were intact except hers, which was scratched out. Clara claimed to see shadowy figures outside her window, their forms disappearing the moment she tried to show anyone else. Henry woke up one morning with bruises on his arms, as though someone had grabbed him in his sleep. Through Arthur's research, the family uncovered the tragic story of the mansion's former caretaker, Edward Barrow. Edward had been a loyal servant to the wealthy family that once owned Whispering Manor, maintaining its grandeur with meticulous care. But when a series of priceless heirlooms went missing, suspicion fell on him. Despite his protests of innocence, Edward was accused of theft. Desperate to protect their reputation, the family confined Edward to the basement, locking him in under the pretense of awaiting the authorities. But the authorities never came. The family abandoned the mansion soon after, leaving Edward to starve in the cold, damp basement. His journal, found by Arthur, revealed his descent into despair. The early entries were detailed accounts of his duties and pride in his work, but they soon turned to frantic scribblings. They won't listen. The shadows are closing in. I am innocent. Justice must be served. His final entry, barely legible, read, I curse this place. I curse all who tread here with deceit in their hearts. Edward's spirit, bound by anger and betrayal, now haunted the manor. He sought not only justice but retribution, lashing out at any who bore the same flaws as those who had wronged him. One night, Clara's curiosity got the better of her. Drawn by the sound of whispers, she ventured into the basement. The door slammed shut behind her, trapping her in pitch darkness. Upstairs, the family heard her screams and rushed to her aid, but the door refused to budge. Henry's fists bruised against the wood, and Margaret's cries filled the air. Inside the basement, Clara saw Edward's spectral form, a gaunt, hollow-eyed figure emanating fury. "Liars!" he hissed, his voice like a blade. "All liars must pay." When the door finally gave way, the family found Clara trembling in the corner, her eyes wide with terror. The ghost's power was undeniable now, and the family knew they couldn't run from this fight. Determined to end the haunting, Arthur proposed a dangerous plan. They would confront Edward and offer him the justice he had been denied. Using the journal as a guide, they held a makeshift ritual in the basement, acknowledging the caretaker's suffering and vowing to uncover the truth of his innocence. The ritual began with Arthur reading aloud from the journal, recounting Edward's tragic story. Margaret lit candles in a circle around the group, their flickering flames casting eerie shadows on the damp walls. Henry stood at the edge of the circle, his hands trembling as he held an old key, a symbolic gesture meant to unlock the truth and set Edward free. As Arthur's voice filled the room, the temperature plummeted. A low growl rumbled through the air, and the ghost's form materialized before them. His hollow eyes bore into each of them, and his voice dripped with malice. "Words won't save you," he snarled. "You are just like them." The room erupted into chaos. Objects flew through the air, shattering against the walls. The candles snuffed out, plunging the basement into darkness. Henry's temper flared, and he shouted, "We're trying to help you. What more do you want?" But Edward's laughter echoed, mocking their efforts. Margaret grabbed Henry's arm, her voice steady, despite the fear in her eyes. "This isn't about us fighting. It's about showing him we understand." Arthur stepped forward, clutching the journal tightly. "Edward, you were wronged," he said, his voice firm. "But punishing us won't bring justice. Let us prove your innocence. Let us help you find peace." For a moment, the ghost hesitated. His form flickered, and the room grew still. Then, with a deafening roar, he lunged at Henry, who fell to his knees. Henry's guilt spilled out in a torrent of words. "I'm sorry for everything, for my anger, for what I've done to my family. I don't want to hurt anyone anymore." The ghost froze, his form wavering. Margaret joined Henry, her hands clasped in silent prayer, while Clara lit a match and reignited the candles. The light seemed to push back the darkness, and Edward's figure softened, his rage giving way to sorrow. "You speak the truth," Edward murmured, his voice no longer menacing. "Perhaps there is hope after all." The journal in Arthur's hands burst into flames, the fire consuming it in seconds. As the last page turned to ash, Edward's form dissolved into a warm golden light that filled the basement. The oppressive weight lifted, and for the first time since they arrived, the house felt like it could be a home. In a final, terrifying moment, Edward's ghost let out a wail that shook the house to its foundations. Then, as quickly as it began, the chaos ceased. The air grew still, and the oppressive weight lifted from the mansion. The family knew the ghost had found peace. The experience left them shaken but united. Henry promised to seek help for his anger, and Margaret found renewed strength in her role as the family's anchor. Arthur and Clara grew closer, their bond forged in the crucible of terror. Whispering Manor remained a dark, mysterious place, but it no longer held the same malice. The family stayed, determined to rebuild their lives, this time together.